Hello everyone, and welcome to part 1 of what I'm hoping will be a 24-part, more or less weekly, video review series chronicling all of the official James Bond cinematic adventures, from the series beginnings all the way up through this year's Spectre. First up, Bond number 1, Dr. No, directed by Terence Young, starring Sean Connery, and released 1962. In some ways, which we'll address in a minute, this is a fairly raw prototype of the half-century and counting of sequels that would follow, with elements such as the pre-title sequence and Q and his gadgets entirely missing. But in a lot of other ways, the 007 franchise explodes startlingly fully formed right out of the gate. The gun barrel is right there as it would appear for decades to come. The greatest instrumental theme for a character in cinematic history is fully intact. We got the exotic locales, the allies, the women, the over-the-top villain, and of course, James Bond himself. His style, his tux, his gambling, his supernatural air of cool, and of course his legendary catchphrase,
"I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond."
are all established within a few minutes of his first ever screen appearance. His relationships with Moneypenny and M, his iconic weapon,
Walter PPK, 7.65 mil with a delivery like a brick through a plate glass window,
and his womanizing are also all established over just the next few minutes. Almost every single thing that would make this character an immortal part of film history forever is all right there immediately. It's probably the best, most impressive thing about the entire film. And Sean Connery nails this introduction and, as we all know, of course, anchors the film and the series brilliantly.
I have no objections.
Also entertaining is Joseph Wiseman as the titular villain, Dr. Julius No.
$1 million, Mr. Bond. You were wondering what it cost.
Though the Bond villain as a concept proves a bit less fully formed than Bond himself. Dr. No's cool demeanor and Nehru jacket and island lair are all instantly iconic, and the scene where he politely explains his evilness to Bond and Honey Rider over dinner is, judged through a 1962 lens, pretty terrific. It's the type of thing so cliche today that you could only really pull it off in a spoof film, like, for example, Kingsman: The Secret Service, but at the time it was probably a very fresh and interesting way for a screen villain to behave.
East, west, just points of the compass, each as stupid as the other. I'm a member of Spectre.
Spectre?
Spectre. Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, Extortion.
But Dr. No's plot, involving toppling American rockets and ruining a U.S. shuttle launch, inspires probably the least dread of any Bond villain scheme, until at least Christatos in 1981's For Your Eyes Only, if not all the way until Dominic Green in 2008's Quantum of Solace. With only 11 minutes of screen time spread over just 2 scenes, Dr. No doesn't get that much time to even make an impact, and it's probably the highest praise I can give to Wiseman's performance that, with just 11 minutes to work with, he still created a character that we Bond fans remember 53 years later.
The successful criminal brain is always superior.
Then, of course, there's the scene where he has Bond put in the most obviously easily escapable prison cell in cinematic history. All the more damning for Dr. No since he had the gall to call Bond stupid to his face all of 2 minutes earlier. We also get likable allies. We have the first and probably coolest Felix Leiter, Jack Lord.
Felix Leiter, Central Intelligence Agency. You must be James Bond.
Maybe too cool, as he was replaced by a less obviously equal to Connery, Felix, and Goldfinger in all the subsequent movies, at least until we got Jeffrey Wright in Casino Royale.
This is Quarrel. He's been helping me.
No hard feelings, I hope.
Only a sore hand.
Also Quarrel, who made enough of an impact that his son, Quarrel Jr., appeared 7 movies later in Live and Let Die. And Honey Rider, who does very, very little in the grand scheme of the plot, but of course has a bikini-clad entrance so iconic that it just might be more remembered among the general non-Bond fanatic film-going populace than the introduction of Bond himself. Probably the rawest and ultimately weakest element of Dr. No is its action scenes. When I say that the action in the Bond series would get much better after this film, I'm not comparing Dr. No to the modern films or even the 80s or 70s films, but I'm saying that Terence Young and Eon Productions would vastly up the caliber of their action filmmaking with the very next film, From Russia with Love, the very next year. Here we have a couple of brawls, a fairly slow-paced shootout with a flame-throwing tank, and in what might be the film's lowlight, an extremely unconvincing rear projection car chase between Bond and Dr. No's henchmen, with Sean Connery jerking the steering wheel rather unconvincingly. Ultimately, this car chase is only a little above par even by the standards of 1960s television, forget big screen film. The film succeeds much more in its suspense sequences, such as Bond luring Dr. No's henchman Professor Dent into a trap, only to shoot him in cold blood in what remains one of his coldest kills in the entire franchise.
I'm working for
Mr. Smith & Wesson. And you've had your 6.
And also dealing with a spider in his bed, being pursued by Dr. No's flunkies on Crab Key, and the film even milks some minor espionage-related tension from elements as small as Bond rigging his hotel room with a hair on the door and powder for fingerprints to find out if bad guys break in while he's away. I wouldn't call Dr. No a great action movie, even by the standards of 1962, but I do think it's a great introduction to the character of 007, a great travelogue of Jamaica, and a solid, sexy for the time suspense flick about spy games.
Stay where you are!
In the grand scheme of the Bond series, I would not rank Dr. No especially high, as the series would grow and better itself continuously from the very next film onwards. But there's also very little actively wrong with it, aside from that car chase and that very easily escapable prison cell, and I wouldn't rank it that low either. It's a nice, solid, and above all confident debut for my favorite film series and favorite screen hero, perhaps a bit light on high-impact visceral action, but with lots of style to go around. It's never been one of my all-time favorite films taken by itself, but as Bond fans, I would say we owe it everything for kicking this franchise off. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back to talk next week about 1963's From Russia with Love.